We are now entering game 30 of the fantasy hockey season. It is crazy to think that we've made it this far. And the last time I made this video, you guys really enjoyed it. So I'm going to give you 6 players that I think are currently skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings. These are players that are on either a very good hot streak, or B, have been moved into a better position in terms of their deployment that give them a really strong outlook for the rest of the season. My name's Mike, and let's jump into the video. Vincent Trocheck is the first player that's currently skyrocketing up the fantasy ranking, and someone I really liked in preseason, and I may have mentioned him in another video, but he continues to be the productive player that we've seen time and time again. Trocheck's a guy that just hits every single category, puts up points, he takes shots on net, he's on the top power play unit, so he contributes in the power play point category, he hits quite a bit, and he's also the #1 faceoff win percentage player in the entire NHL. What we've seen from Vincent Trocheck over the last 2 months has been nothing short of great. If you've owned him, hopefully you held on to him, because he did have a really slow start in October. Just 4 points in 9 games. He was playing on the third line. They really wanted to test out the experiment with Filip Gustavsson, who was playing on the second line in replacement of Vincent Trocheck. But since the injury to Gustavsson, Trocheck has moved up back into a top 6 role, and we've only seen his minutes scale up. He was playing 18 minutes back in October, 20 minutes in November. Now he's up to 22 minutes per night so far in December, and that's exactly what you want to see from a guy who has very productive per 60 rates. From November till now, so this is with the injury to Filip Gustavsson and Trocheck moving into a top 6 role, 17 games played, 21 points, so over a point per game pace, 44 shots on goal, 23 hits, 6 points in the power play, and a league best 64% faceoff win percentage. So if you do own him in leagues that count faceoff wins, he is one of the, if not the best player right now in the league, just due to his overall production. Now, with his current deployment and his minutes scaling well over 20 per night, I do think he does have upside to be a top 50 player for the rest of the season. I did mention this with the FP guys, and I'm curious what everyone else thinks. The real draft strategy last season was, or going into this year, was taking elite wingers and elite defensemen and then filling up your center with guys that are going 100 plus, like Sam Bennett, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Vincent Trocheck. I mentioned this a number of times now, and that was definitely the play. I'm happy to say that I own Trocheck in a couple of leagues right now, but he has been extremely good, and he's currently skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings. Valeri Nichushkin has been a hot topic of conversation, not only in our Discord, but all over the comment section, especially in the buy, sell, hold video. Nichushkin, the season for him right now is here to stay. The deployment is just way too good, and he was extremely good last year with 47 points in 53 games. His point per game pace is very similar this year to what we saw last season. Just with this year, it was a matter of him finally getting that opportunity, which we've seen since Lehkonen got injured, unfortunately, and the Jonathan Drouin experiment just failed to pan out. So amongst forwards since November 12th, this was around the time that Nichushkin got moved back up to the top line and top power play unit. 23 minutes and 41 seconds average time on ice, which is second amongst all forwards, only behind Mikko Rantanen. He has 15 points, which is the 17th most, 43 shots, the 25th most, but he's also hitting a lot more this season than we saw last year with 21 hits since November 12th. The production's been great from Nichushkin, especially offensively, but the most notable part is the minutes we're seeing from him. 23 minutes and 41 seconds is up there with even some of the top defensemen. His current pace this season, 32 goals, 42 assists, 227 shots on goal, and 104 hits. You know how much I like the 200 plus shot, 100 plus hit mix in terms of forwards, but there's not many forwards that have that mix but also have this goal and assist production. The outlook for the rest of the season for Nichushkin, it seems sustainable. He's skating top line, power play 1. The minutes have not gone down at all since the Lehkonen injury. Lehkonen's due back in about 6 to 8 weeks, so we will see what happens. But with this production right now, I can't see them moving Nichushkin, who has made their team a very successful offensive team. He's also playing first line with Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, 2 100-point players, while also skating a lot of time 5-on-5 and a lot of time on the power play with Cale Makar, who is a 100-point defenseman. You just can't find this production very often. A guy that was relatively low owned just 3-4 weeks ago when we were mentioning him at about 20 to 40% rostered. He was being dropped. If you've added him, he's been a league winner so far for you this season. He definitely has top 75 upside for the rest of the season. I just want to know with Nichushkin, he does have some injury history, so there may be a time to sell high on him right now, but I do think for the rest of the season, he has a very strong outlook. At the time of recording, just 36% of you are subscribed to the channel, so if you've enjoyed the content so far, make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with all the content that we're going to be pumping out for the rest of the season. In addition, we have updated our projections for the rest of the season. If you're interested in gaining access to that, head on over to our Patreon. The link will be in the description. If you have any questions, make sure you leave a comment in this video or simply message me on Discord. Let's jump back into the video, guys. There is nothing I dislike more than talking about goaltending just because of how big of a mystery it's been this season. But with Filip Gustavsson, someone who's really turned his season around in the last couple games, and more notably over the last 2 months. A lot of people sold low on Filip Gustavsson. If you traded him, you probably traded him at his lowest value, or you dropped him. I was actually able to scoop him up in 2 $50 buy-in leagues. People were just so sick of having their goaltender give up 3, 4, 5 goals a night, not win many games. He has 16 starts this season and just 6 wins, not a very good win percentage from a guy who was a Vezina candidate last year, but he played under 40 games, and that's kind of what held him back. His monthly stats, month over month, in October, 5 games started, a 2-2-1 record, an 885 save percentage, and a 436 goals against average. This was around the time we saw his roster percentage drop around 30%, but in November, he picked it up a little bit with a 2-4-1 record, an 898 save percentage, and a 282 goals against average. And now in December, he's off to a very good start. 3 games started, 2-1 record, a 944 save percentage, and a 135 goals against average. Goalies are still a mystery, but with Filip Gustavsson, his value is now skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings with how good he's been over the last 6 or 7 games, where he's given up no more than 3 goals. In 2022, he was a very strong goalie, as I mentioned, a 22-9-7 record with a 931 save percentage and a 210 goals against average. If you added him and Minnesota went on a really good run, he was arguably a league winner for you. I did end up keeping him in one of my big leagues as well. I held on to him, so hopefully this starts to pay off some dividends. For the rest of the season, we can safely say he is a top 10 goalie. It's not that safe because goalies continue to be a mystery this season with all the blunders we've seen from even the top goalies in the league right now. But with Gustavsson, a very strong outlook if this Minnesota team can continue on the pace that they've been over the last couple of weeks. With recent and unfortunate news that Kyle Connor may be out for 6 to 8 weeks, the reason I have an asterisk there is because it's not confirmed and he is currently considered day-to-day. But if it is confirmed, Nikolaj Ehlers is a player, given his current role, that should start to skyrocket up the fantasy rankings, and we want to get in before other people do. The Jets are finally forcing their hand to finally play Nikolaj Ehlers, a guy who has been an offensive threat for a number of years that just hasn't been able to stay healthy and hasn't really been able to put together the season that we've all hoped from Ehlers. But he's been healthy so far this season. He's shooting the puck still at an elite rate that we've seen in the past for him. It's just a matter of him getting that deployment. There's times where he plays 11 minutes and there's times where he plays 20 minutes. But if Kyle Connor is out for the next 2 months, this should be an opportunity for Nikolaj Ehlers to step into a line 1 role, which we've seen over the last couple of games, and a power play 1 role, which is exactly where we want to see him. Over the last 10 games, he's been a lot better than what we've seen in the early going, averaging around 17 minutes time on ice, 7 points, 22 shots on goal, and 41 shot attempts. The shot attempts and shots are down a little bit, but there's nothing to worry about because Ehlers historically is a very high volume shooter. It's just a matter of him getting minutes. So far this season, he has the 60th best shot rate. He's missing the net and shots are getting blocked a lot more than we've seen in his career. And this is shown by his 22nd best shot attempt rate. And that's what the number you want to be looking at for Ehlers, is how much Corsi for he's getting towards the net. Ehlers, with Connor out, is moving up to the top power play unit. That's what we saw in the game that he got injured. He played 20 plus minutes. If we can see these big minutes moving forward like we've seen over the last 5 games, and in the game when Connor got injured, he could have a very strong next 2 months or rest of season, depending on the severity of the Kyle Connor injury. I like Ehlers here. His roster percentage is relatively low, so you can probably add him. I dropped him in a couple leagues, and I'm kind of regretting my decision right now, but hopefully you can hold on to him or add him in some of your leagues. Morgan Rielly is a player that I talked about in my buy, sell, and hold video as a player that you need to be buying, and I'm going to reiterate my take saying that he is a player that's currently skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings into top 7 to 10 defenseman territory. With news that John Klingberg may be out for the rest of the season, Morgan Rielly now steps in, and he has stepped in over the last 10 games into a power play 1 role. When he was playing power play 2 and still on pair 1, the outlook was strong, but definitely not as strong as it is right now when he's getting a minute and a half, a minute and 50 seconds on the top power play unit where the majority of goals are scored for teams. He's currently playing a career high 25 minutes and 5 seconds, and over the last 10 games, he's played 25 minutes and 35 seconds, which is top 10 over that time. And over the last 10 games, amongst all defensemen, he ranks 10th with 7 points. He has 27 shots on net, which is 4th best, and 17 scoring chances with the 7th most. He's an offensive defenseman by trait, but had to transition more into a defensive role with just the lack of defenders on the Toronto Maple Leafs. But now that he's skating in this top pair role and the power play 1 role, he's getting way more offensive looks, and that's what you want to be seeing from a defenseman who's playing on such a highly offensive team. He has 0 competition. He's the number 1 D. He's the clear power play 1 quarterback on a good team like the Toronto Maple Leafs. For the rest of the season, I would project his outlook to be a top 7 defenseman upside if he can continue to sustain playing big minutes in a high leverage role like we've seen over the last 10 games and since the Klingberg injury. The last player for this video is Casey Mittelstadt of the Buffalo Sabres. I was very curious to see what his deployment would look like with Tage Thompson healthy and back in the lineup, but it looks like Mittelstadt will continue to man that top line and power play 1, and Tage will now shift over to a right wing role. This may be the case that Tage did hurt his wrist, so faceoffs may be a little bit more difficult for him. And Mittelstadt has been playing extremely well recently in a very high leverage role. He's playing a career high 19 minutes and 6 seconds time on ice right now, 3.5 minute jump from 2022, one of the biggest jumps amongst all forwards. And it's crazy to see, very similar to Vincent Trocheck, that in October he was playing around 16:30, bumped up to 19 minutes in November, and now he's playing over 22 minutes per night in December, with a recent game against Montreal that went into shootout where he played 27 minutes. He has bumped Dylan Cousins as the number 1 center on a Buffalo Sabres team that really is desperate to find the offense that they had just last season. With Casey Mittelstadt, he's still low rostered, which means you do have an opportunity to add him, but I do want to caution on the side that Casey Mittelstadt does have relatively low goal upside, and he does have a middle in the pack shot volume, but he does have extremely strong point upside as he's more of a playmaker style player, which kind of hurts him in terms of fantasy value, but still the point upside is definitely high, and we can safely project him for around 70 points this season if he continues to play in a high leverage role like we've seen recently. Very strong developments from the Buffalo Sabres in terms of deploying their former top prospect in Casey Mittelstadt. He put up 59 points last season. If he continues to play well over 20 minutes per night in a role with Jeff Skinner and Tage Thompson and on that top power play unit for a team that ranked top 5 in goals for last season, if they can start to find out their offense, Casey Mittelstadt's in for a very strong rest of season. Definitely a guy I want to be looking to roster in those 12 to 14 plus team leagues, and someone that is currently skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings. That will do it for these 6 players that are skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the next video.